It was just an ordinary night. At first, my parents were getting ready to go pick up my grandma from the airport, and I was excited to see her. But as soon as we started getting everything ready, we realized something. We had forgotten to clean up after the party we threw the night before. The house was a mess. Dirty dishes piled up, cups and plates everywhere, and the kitchen was a disaster. My mom looked at the clock and said, "We don't have time to clean all this up before we leave." I started picking up the kitchen, but I knew it wouldn't be enough, and there was too much to do. That's when my dad had an idea. He pulled out a small box from under the counter. It was the robot cleaner, something we had bought a few weeks ago but hadn't really used yet. "Let's set this up. We'll let it clean while we're gone, and when we get back, the house will be ready," my dad said. The robot was controlled through an app on his phone, and we could stop it or make it clean wherever we wanted. It seemed like the perfect solution. We all left the house and drove to the airport. The whole time, we were chatting about Grandma, but my dad kept glancing at his phone. Everything seemed normal. But then, as soon as we got to the airport parking lot, my dad got a notification on his phone. It said, "Please drop the robot." My dad froze. The notification was strange. We were still at the airport and no one was home. It didn't make sense. My dad quickly checked the app on his phone, but the robot was still running, cleaning the house. The message kept repeating, "Please drop the robot." "Who's sending this?" my dad muttered, staring at his phone. I felt a knot in my stomach. He checked the cameras in our house using the phone, hoping to see something. But all of the cameras showed nothing. No one was in the house. I could tell my dad was getting worried, but he tried to stay calm. "It's probably a glitch. Maybe the app is messing up," he said, but it didn't sound convincing. But the messages didn't stop. "Please drop the robot," over and over again. "We need to go home," my dad said, his voice tense. "Something's wrong." Luckily, my mom's flight hadn't landed yet, so we had some time. We decided to drive back home to check on things. When we got back to the house, things were even stranger. The front door was slightly ajar, even though we had locked it before we left. My dad motioned for us to stay behind, and he carefully stepped inside. "Something's not right," he whispered. We slowly stepped inside, and that's when we saw it. The robot was lying on the floor. Its wheels stopped, and the lights on it were dim. It looked as though it had fallen over. But what was even stranger was the note lying next to it. My dad picked it up, and his face went pale as he read the words, "You're not leaving this alive. Just so you know, I'm not leaving you guys alone." "What is this?" my dad said, his voice shaking. I didn't know what to say. I was terrified. But there was more. My dad opened the camera feed on his phone to check what had happened. He was hoping to see something that would explain this. And that's when he saw it. On the camera, there was a figure. A person in a black hoodie and a mask, standing near the robot. The person was wearing a black hoodie, with the hood up and a mask covering their face. The figure seemed to be looking directly at the camera, staring at us. "Who is that?" my dad whispered. We couldn't tell their face because the mask and the shadows hid it, but I could feel the fear rising in my chest. And then we heard the voice. Through the camera, the person said, "You're not leaving this alive." We froze, knowing what was happening. Why was this person in our house? Who were they? After what felt like forever, we drove back to the airport to pick up my mom. When we got back home, the house felt different. I kept looking around, expecting to see the person in the black hoodie, but there was no one there. Just the empty house. The robot was still on the floor, its lights off, but everything seemed quiet. We were all on edge, not knowing what to do next. My dad picked up the note and read it out loud again, but there was nothing new in it. It just said the same thing. "You're not leaving this alive." The whole thing was so confusing and terrifying. I couldn't stop thinking about the person in the black hoodie. Why did they do this? Why us? We decided to call the cops. They came over to investigate and search the area around our house. But sadly, they couldn't find anyone. No one had been caught on camera, and there were no other signs of anyone being there. It was like they had just vanished into thin air. My parents talked to the police, and they assured us that we were safe, even though I didn't feel safe. And the whole thing felt too strange. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe someone was messing with us. But it didn't feel like that. It felt real. And even though nothing happened after that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. And we never found out who the person in the black hoodie was. And after that, things seemed to go back to normal. We continued living in our house, but every now and then, I'd hear something strange or get a feeling that we weren't alone. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe it was just some weird glitch. But I'll never forget the message on the phone and the figure staring at us through the camera. I don't know what happened, but I'm just glad we were okay. It could have been worse. I guess sometimes things like this just don't make sense, but for now, I'm hoping that nothing like that happens again, and that maybe that guy was just a prankster trying to mess with us. As I grew older, I could realize how much scarier that whole situation was. At the time, it felt like just some strange event, but looking back now, it makes my heart race. It was more than just a prank. It was something far more terrifying. I still wonder who that person was, and why they decided to come to our house. And sometimes, I can't shake the feeling that maybe they'll come back. But for now, I try not to think about it too much, hoping that I won't see that black hoodie again, and that maybe that guy was just a prankster. It was late at night, and I was sitting on the couch watching TV. I'd done most of my chores earlier, but I forgot to vacuum the floors. I was too tired to get up and do it myself, so I decided to use the robot vacuum. I grabbed my phone and opened the app. I pressed the button to start the robot, and it beeped to life. I watched as it rolled out of its dock and started cleaning the living room. It hummed softly as it moved, and I went back to watching TV. After a few minutes, I felt curious and decided to check the app to see how much the robot had cleaned. The app showed a map of my house, with a little dot marking where the robot was. But then I saw something strange, too. There was another marker on the map. It was shaped like a person. At first I thought it was a glitch. Maybe the app was acting weird, but the marker didn't disappear. It was in the same room as me, the living room. My chest tightened, and I looked around the room. Nobody was there. It was just me and the soft hum of the robot. "That's weird," I said to myself, trying to stay calm. I refreshed the app, hoping the marker would disappear. But it didn't. Instead, it moved. The person marker followed the robot into the hallway. Now I was scared. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a few steps toward the hallway, but stopped. The hallway was dark, and I couldn't bring myself to go any farther. I grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend. "Hey, I think someone's in my house," I whispered. "What, are you okay?" he asked, sounding worried. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "The robot app is showing a person in my house, but I don't see anyone." "Stay where you are," he said. "Lock your door. I'm on my way." I hung up the phone and locked myself in my bedroom. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the door. My ears strained to hear anything outside, but it was silent. After what felt like forever, I heard a creak. It was faint, but it was there. A footstep. Someone was walking down the hallway. I held my breath as the sound got closer. My hands clutched my phone tightly, and I prayed my boyfriend would get here soon. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. The doorknob turned. I jumped to my feet, holding the door closed with all my strength. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice shaking. There was no answer, but the door rattled as if someone was trying to open it. Suddenly, the rattling stopped. I heard heavy breathing on the other side of the door. Then the person spoke.
"You can't hide forever,"
a deep voice said. My heart sank. I scrambled to find something to defend myself. I grabbed a lamp from my bedside table. holding it tightly in my hands. My whole body was shaking. The door burst open and I screamed. A man stepped into the room. He looked about 50 or 60 years old, with messy gray hair and wild eyes. In his hand, he held a knife. "Stay back," I yelled, swinging the lamp at him. He lunged at me, but I hit him in the face with the lamp. He stumbled back, dropping the knife. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I sprinted to the back door and locked it behind me, trapping him inside the house. A few minutes later, my boyfriend arrived. He saw the panic on my face and immediately called the police. When the police arrived, they searched the house and found the man hiding in a closet. They arrested him and told me something that made my blood run cold. The man had been living in my house for 3 days. He had been hiding in a crawl space, watching me, waiting for the right moment. The officer looked at me and said, "You're lucky you used that robot vacuum. It probably saved your life." I shuddered at the thought. If I hadn't turned on the robot that night, I might not have known he was there. As I sat with my boyfriend, I couldn't help but feel grateful for that little machine. It had done more than clean my floors. It had saved my life.